Welcome, and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Doug Snyder, the Chief Technologist for U.S. Public Sector at Veritas Technologies, and David Surgeon, the Senior Director of Defense and IC Public Sector at Veritas Technologies. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having us on, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
One of the first questions I wanted to ask is, how do you manage the tool sets that are so specific to a cloud in respect to multi-cloud resiliency?
Yeah, Scott, that's the challenge that customers face. I mean, we have to be honest with each other. There is really no Uber cloud that anyone's going into. Most customers live in a hybrid cloud world. And if you look at the tool sets that the cloud developers give you, they're obviously very specific to that particular environment. And that's true whether it's a public cloud or a private cloud or even an on-premise cloud. And with Veritas, what we strive to do is to virtualize as much as possible the management of data and infrastructure between these clouds. So if you learn Veritas technologies for resiliency, as an example, you can apply that same technology to Amazon, to Azure, to Google, to your on-prem environment, and create a hybrid cloud and resilient application. Because really, with the application and the information is what's important. The platform is certainly very critical, and that is something that customers are beginning to adopt, is the change in methodology of managing a cloud platform versus an on-premise platform. But you still need to manage the application and delivery of services, and that's where Veritas sits. So for the most part, we allow our customers to freely adopt whatever cloud technology they would prefer. And yet, when it comes to managing and protecting the data, making it resilient, making sure that they're protected against any downtime, we give them a common tool set that spans the entirety of their hybrid cloud.
Scott, if I could add to that, when you look from a DoD perspective, the ability is flexibility, right? On that continuum, as Doug says, the DoD is trying to accelerate this. The services are trying to accelerate their cloud drive. Where are they on that continuum from, the tactical edge to the core to the cloud? And I think that's what's critical, is having the flexibility and adaptability that, hey, I may still have some piece at the tactical edge that I need to have as we drive to the joint all domain operations. But I also, at the same time, we're going to the cloud, we're moving back in or front end applications. How do we do that either in parallel or try to get some acceleration to that? And I think that's where we can bring some value and provide support to DoD as a whole.
How does it actually impact certain agencies when they have to manage these different tools when it comes to the goal, the virtual and the cloud environments?
Well, think of the back in the day when we went from Unix to Linux systems, for example. There was a whole new paradigm for that customer. So people that grew up in the Unix world, sometimes had a big adjustment. And that was actually a very small change. Those two operating systems are fairly closely related. But you can look at any technology change like that, such as moving storage vendors, and say that, yes, now I have a problem. If I have the existing technology, I have to maintain that skill set and learn something new. Cloud is actually bringing in those same challenges, right? Because there's a mystique, I think, that you just spin up a cloud provider and you're ready to go. It's not nearly that simple. You have to know their underlying storage capabilities, the different types of storage. You have to know their virtual machines. You learn the differences in their platform as a service or software as a service offerings as well. So as they adopt more and more clouds and more technology specific to that cloud, yes, that learning and that tool set and that knowledge transfer becomes much more difficult because there's just so much more. And again, that's why Veritas focuses so much on standardizing the protection and replication and resiliency of these clouds, because that's something we can take off that customer's plate. Learn one tool set, and if you need visibility across, everything from your existing on-prem, NAS filers to your platform as a service or software as a storage service, storage consumption and spend, Veritas has tool sets that allow you to do that. And it's very extensible. So if you bring on the next platform, if we don't support it right away, there's a good chance that we'll bring in support very soon if we don't already have it. So by extending the management of a single tool set across the hybrid cloud environment, we've made that job much, much more simple.
I wanted to move to data a little bit. How we don't always have a complete picture of data, even though we're collecting it constantly and getting a lot of it. So, when you don't have a complete picture, how can you still do your job, especially in these sort of operational kind of settings, and when you're trying to figure out where your capacity planning placements are going to be?
Sure. And not just capacity planning, think of the mission, right? If you have to support the warfighter and if you are looking at multiple repositories of data, how well do you know that that data is clean? And by clean, I mean, is there a single verified copy that you really want to base your tactical decisions on? And what happens over time is that as data sets get copied and moved around, sometimes there are errors, sometimes there's multiple copies, and you might end up with 5 or 6 silos of one set of data, but yet there's other information you want to pull into that decision-making process where maybe there's only, one copy or 2 copies. And if you apply blindly some big data logic, for example, you may find out that you're making, tactical decisions that aren't based on reality because you have an offset in the data. Veritas allows customers to dig through that mountain of data, and again, no matter where it sits, on-prem, cloud, platform as a service, infrastructure, and start sussing out what is really relevant to my mission. What do I have multiple copies of? What is old and beyond the mission parameters that I'm, seeking to achieve? And then clear that out. Let's maybe not get rid of it if we can't, but let's put it somewhere else where we know it's set aside. And that allows the warfighter to more comfortably make decisions based on a clean set of data that they know has been, combed through at the high level. We're not going to do the data analysis itself, but we're going to make those results that much better.
Yeah, and I think if you look operational, Scott, we start talking, I mentioned earlier about tactical edge to the core of the cloud is, JADC2 is about how do we get the information, get it quickly. I call it velocity of data. It's moving quickly. People need to make decisions. And how do we push that data out to Doug's earlier point about the quality of data? There's a lot of data, right? And it's just going up. The scale is going up so dramatically. How do we get that information right time, right place to make those decisions? And of course, when you bring it back to, as we talk, the core and that strategic environment, how do we as the senior leaders, those in those positions, be able to take that data and to make decisions that are going to affect the impact of the organization, whether it's in a wartime situation or whether it's in a garrison environment or anywhere on that spectrum. It's important to make sure that we have quality data at the right time to make those decisions. And I think that's where this data management portion comes in. That's where the ability to scan that spectrum of whether it's tactical data all the way up to core, or even to be able to put it into the cloud, whatever that environment is. I know that they're getting the data at the right time so they can make those critical decisions to impact the organization, or in this case, the warfighter, whatever the scenario may be.
And I think you thought ahead to my next question a bit here, which is, you're looking at tons of different data. DoD has sensors coming in from airplanes, from drones, from everything you can think of. Part of JADC2 is to bring all those streams in and consolidate it so you can make a decision. How can you do that? How can you make this something that is digestible for a human being to say go or don't go?
Right.
Well, again, we take a look at the breadth of our portfolio. In some cases, we can solve some of these issues or at least make them better and more operationally efficient with a storage solution, for example. JADC and directing streams of data into multiple sources is really mission number one at Veritas. We developed our first commercial file system and volume manager to handle that similar type of scenario in the telco world, handling the vast amount of call data records. So in some cases, again, we may not actually provide the analysis. We may make that analysis better, faster, cheaper, and get to those desired end results much, much more quickly. In some cases, again, you can't necessarily ingest all that data and make decisions in real time. I know that's the desired effort, but with our other management solutions we just talked about, we can ensure that as data gets copied and moved around, that there is that gold copy where you actually do make the informational decisions from. So with respect to JADC, I believe that we're going to be more in the supporting role, from making the infrastructure more resilient, higher performing, certainly keep the veracity and the type of data change down to a minimum, and hopefully get some better results from those multiple sources.
And I think if you extend that, when you look at the classification of data coming into Doug's point, capturing that data at the tactical edge. And again, it could be on that spectrum, or it could be even strategic, being able to start managing the type of data that you're getting in and the influx and the type of sources, as was alluded to earlier, then starting to be able to do it. So yes, it's in a supporting effort, but yet it's on that continuum of supporting, getting the data, the quality data to make decisions. And we do a lot of support on multiple networks, whether it's the unclassed to secret collateral to the TS and above, or a special access program, any of those, or if you look coalition from whether it's BICs or other type of collaboration networks, that type of ability to get that and segment that data and being able to get it into, now instead of vast amounts of data, I can start getting them into manageable types of information that I can make those decisions, working with alliance partners and others, depending on the solution that DoD is providing. And then the other piece that's really important here is the one that I know will resonate with the financial side of it, is the open money, right? How do we manage the influx of data as we get into the cloud? When there's vast amounts of data and we're moving those workflows of data up into the cloud, we're not taking every big footprint. A lot of the questions we get at the senior levels of DoD and even the IC is, I have a data lake, or I have large amounts of information I can't afford, or can I manage through that? How do I get that data and get that up and out and manage a cloud, whether it's a singular cloud or it's a multi-cloud environment or a hybrid or someone in between? And I think that's where we add some value along with our partnerships and alliance partners.
Yeah, David brings up a great point. If you take a look at the dynamics of storing data, on premise, it's generally a large upfront capital expenditure and then maintenance over time. And sometimes once that capital expenditure is completed, it's easy to justify, keeping that data. But when you go to the cloud, you're now on a recurring cost model. So if you were comfortable storing 20-year-old data that didn't have much relevance, but you didn't want to mess around with getting rid of it, well, that was perhaps acceptable at some point, in the premise. But when you move that much data into the cloud, well, now you're paying for that every single month. And that never goes away. It'll only grow over time. So, David makes a great point there that, not only can we help with the quality of the data, but if they do want to migrate, some of this information into the cloud, let's move the right data to the cloud.
It's a lot to think about for the future. Doug, Dave, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. Doug Snyder's the Chief Technologist for U.S. Public Sector at Veritas Technologies, and David Surgeon is the Senior Director for Defense and IC Public Sector at Veritas Technologies. I'm your moderator, Scott Massioni, and you're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Veritas.